Welcome to the Southeast Retirement Planners podcast, where we will go beyond the balance sheet with our guests, not only to share from our personal experience as financial advisors of over 25 plus years, but also to learn from our guests about the issues and topics that are important to them. Our firm specializes in taking care of the financial plans for individuals and small businesses by helping our clients identify their individual goals and taking a conservative and ongoing approach to helping accomplish them. We are located in Hickory, North Carolina, and look forward to continuing to serve our clients and our community. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Welcome back to the Southeast Retirement Planners podcast. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who don't know or would be interested in subscribing to our podcast channel, you can find all that information out on our website at www.seretirementplanners.com, and just click on our YouTube channel through our podcast page and be sure to like and subscribe and share. But all that information is on our website. So thank you again for joining us for another episode. And today I'm very excited. Dear friend and local owner of a veterinarian practice here in town, Animal Hospital North, Christine Duke, Dr. Duke. Thanks for coming.
I'm glad to be here.
That's good. So you, we've known each other for a long time.
A long time.
And I get to hear all the crazy stories about your animal interactions and some about your adult parenting or pet owner interactions.
Yeah, there you go.
But I wanted to talk to you about a couple of things. We can certainly talk about some of that too, but I want to talk to you about a couple of things, like kind of how your business got started and sort of what your career path has been. You're the doctor at one of the doctors at Animal Hospital North, and you guys have been there for 11 and a half years.
Yeah.
But you didn't just start there. So tell me a little bit about how you got into veterinary medicine.
Okay, well, I did my undergrad at Chapel Hill and then went on. I wasn't sure I wanted to be a veterinarian. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went on and got a grad degree at Clemson in zoology. Decided while I was there that I did not have any interest in doing anything having to do with research. So ended up applying to vet school. I went to vet school at Kansas State for 4 years, out in Manhattan, Kansas. When I graduated from vet school, I actually took a job in Asheville. And worked in Asheville for a year or so, and ended up back in Hickory after that, working for another veterinarian in Hickory.
So when you're in vet school, do you have the same kind of thing as far as med school, as far as like residencies and those types of things?
So you don't have to. So if you're just going to be a GP, which is basically what I am, so you go into general practice, you can just do 4 years of veterinary school. But if you want to specialize, and specialties in veterinary medicine have grown leaps and bounds, I would say, since
like
I
large
graduated.
Animal vets and things like
well,
that.
so like a board certified surgeon, oncologists, every specialist pretty much that they have in human medicine, they have in our world as well. And so that's really grown since I graduated from vet school 19 years ago. So you can be, but to become an oncologist or an internist or a ophthalmologist or a boarded certified surgeon, you have to go on and do an internship and residency like you do in human medicine.
Okay.
But, to be a general practitioner, you do 4 years of vet school. But then when you come out, your first year or two of working, you're learning a lot. So that's almost, you're not paid a lot. So because you're still learning so much, that I would say, especially back when I graduated, that was still considered almost like a paid internship.
Right.
Right. Yes, you are paid some money, but not you're not considered fully trained until you've been out for a year or two, I would say.
Okay.
Which is fair.
Now, when you were in school, though, I would assume most of the people graduating vet school at that time were GP, because there wasn't as much of a need for all these specialty vets, right?
Yeah, that's 100% true. And where I went to school, there was a portion that were going, I went in Kansas, so there was
It's Manhattan, though. So.
Manhattan, Kansas,
Yeah.
The little apple. So a portion of the students there were going to, especially I would say the male portion, were going into large animal medicine because of all the cattle ranches and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So, you can do that as well, mixed animal practice or mobile practice, but we're all still considered GPs. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So you've finished up med school, Asheville for a little while, then to Hickory, and you were
Ended up
working
back in
for
Hickory.
another vet.
Yes, I was associate veterinarian, so I was working for another veterinarian that owns several hospitals, and I did that for 7 years probably about, and then and that's when I decided to take the plunge into owning my own. And how that came about is I just decided that I wanted to be able to practice veterinary medicine the way I wanted to practice. So I wanted to be able to take care of the owners and the pets the way I wanted to do it.
Instead of kind of being under the direction of whoever
Yes.
runs the practice, which
Right.
isn't nececessarily a bad thing, but
No,
it's just everybody
different.
does it different. Sure.
And honestly, my husband would just tell you that it's because I'm so type A, but
Like to be
which
in
may
control of
play
things.
into it. But yeah,
Well,
I
so,
wanted to
all
do
right.
it my own way.
Speaking of your husband, you guys met when you were in school at Clemson?
Clemson, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I was only there for 2 years, but he was in school, and that's where we met. And then we got married when I graduated from vet school, so we didn't get married till
So
after
he
I
was
had my
back and
degree.
forth up to Manhattan,
Yes,
Kansas.
yes, but he was in South Carolina the majority of that time.
Yeah.
There's not a lot in Manhattan, Kansas,
Right.
so it's not like he was going to move there.
You're not going to go visit a lot.
Plus,
if you
I was
don't
pretty
have to.
busy in vet school, so
Okay.
I just did school and then
So
came home.
in the time that you came back to Asheville and then into Hickory, your family life changed as well. I mean, so you got married after vet
As
school.
soon as I graduated from vet school, I got married, took a job in Asheville, and then we came back to Hickory not long, a year or so after, and then, like I said, I was working for somebody else in town. I had 2 children during that time, and when my youngest child was 2, is when we took the plunge into business ownership. She had just turned 2.
Right.
Yep. And my older child was daughter, Addie. She was 5. So she had just started kindergarten.
And you're
And
like, this seems like a peaceful time. Like we're not real busy right now or anything.
That was an interesting time. So basically, I decided that, like I said, I wanted to do it my own way. And I essentially bought a very small practice in a rented building that was losing money. It was not a profitable.
Is the building still
business.
there?
It is still there. It's rented by somebody else now. So it was a big leap of faith. I mean, a huge leap of faith. When I signed all the closing documents, my 2-year-old was like running around in the room at the time. So it was a big leap of faith. And it was just me. I had a receptionist and one technician, which is what we call our nurses, veterinary nurses.
Right.
And that's all. That's all it was.
Now, Ben also became a part of the world of veterinary medicine somewhere along those lines, just operationally, managerially, right?
Yes. So he is not medically trained or minded at all, but I couldn't have done it without him, to be honest. He is the financial money, HR, inventory ordering. All the things that I didn't have time or any really desire to take on. And most veterinarians, I think, would tell you the same thing. Like, we're not people that go into this to manage a business.
No, that's the challenge. There's a lot of business owners that are in that same boat where they have the passion for it and they have the skill set to do the work that they do, but then operationally it turns into a different sort of animal that a lot of times they're not really ready for.
Yes. And especially like the business aspect of it, like I'm not only not interested in that, like it's not something that interests me, like all the ins and outs of that, but also like I didn't have time. When you're a doctor all day, and then you're also, in my case, a mom, like I don't know when I would have sat down and balanced books and done inventory and back there I didn't really have to manage a lot of HR because I had 2 employees, but But, and negotiated the lease and, all the things you have to do to own a business. Like people do it. I mean, there's plenty of, veterinarians out there doing all that stuff for themselves, but I don't think I would have taken on the business ownership if I didn't have Ben to manage that stuff. And that's where his brain is. Like that's what he does. He has an MBA.
He's very good at it.
And that's what he does. He doesn't do the medical side of it at all.
So what's your favorite animal?
My favorite animal?
Yeah.
I mean, I should say dog or cat, but otters are my favorite animals.
Really?
Yeah. They're so happy all the time.
They do seem really happy.
But I think I'm definitely a big dog person. Although we have a little dog right now, and he's pretty sweet too. But I'm probably more of a dog person.
Let's talk about your pets for a little while.
Oh, wow.
So you had, when did you, your first dog, I mean, it's like your first dog. It's y'all's, your family's first dog.
Well, it was Benson, my first dog,
Yeah.
who was pretty much our first child.
Yep.
So our first child was four-legged, and he passed away. He lived a long, full life, but passed away when the kids were younger. So I guess they were never real, they didn't have the bond with him that we did. But
because he was
he's almost 14, yeah. So he was a great dog. So then we got the kid dogs, which you're pretty aware.
What kind of dog was he?
He was a German Shorthair Pointer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was a really good dog. And then along came the two dogs we have now, who you know. So they're an interesting part of the family.
Well, listen, so you have a golden doodle, which is you probably got Norbert, which is a hysterical name. You got him before it was really trendy to have this breed of dog.
We only had 2 doodle patients in the practice when we got Norbert, and the reason we got him is because I wanted a super kid friendly. The kids were tiny, and I wanted a super kid friendly dog. And we just had these two doodle patients.
Yeah.
That's it. Golden doodle patients, I guess I should say. That's all we had in the entire practice 7 years ago.
How many do you have now?
Oh my gosh. Everything's a doodle.
Right.
Everything's a doodle. Not just a golden doodle. I mean, a doodle everything.
Yeah.
Saw a French bulldog doodle the other day.
Do they call that a Frenchie doodle?
We couldn't figure it out. We
awful.
call it a fruitle. I don't know.
What?
I don't know. One of the techs named it.
All right. So is the only reason that this is going on is the hypoallergenic thing?
Maybe. I don't know.
Because poodles don't really shed.
Yeah. I don't know why it took on and took off the way it did.
It's everything's a doodle.
Everything. Now there's mini doodles. It's crazy. And they're gotten really, really expensive too. It's crazy how much people are spending on, they're mutts, really. They're mixed breed dogs, but people have spent a lot of money on them now. And
listen, people will spend an insane amount of money on their animals.
Yeah, but it's funny. They'll spend an insane amount of money on some things and not others. So, we don't necessarily see that on the veterinary care side of things all the time.
I wouldn't imagine. Yeah.
So, people complain about a $20 rabies vaccine, but they'll go to PetSmart
and buy a $60 collar for each day of the week.
Yeah.
Because you got to have a different collar on Monday and then Tuesday. Right.
Yeah, it's funny.
Well, I hate little dogs. As a general rule, I don't like little dogs. I've never been around a little dog that listens or is in any way obedient.
It's true.
They do whatever they want to do, and all owners of little dogs don't care. And it bothers me.
Well, it's less annoying when it's a little dog than when it's a big dog.
I guess that's what it is. And so however, your little dog, Howie, has made me a believer. And I think it's partly Howie, but partly Charlotte too, because that's really her dog.
They have a very strong bond. So I say that they are each other's emotional support animal. So, but yes, we have Howie. So we have Norbert, who is named after the dragon in Harry Potter.
Right.
He's 90 pounds, golden doodle. And then we acquired Howie from a local rescue, who they're amazing. And he is an 8.5 pound something. He's a mix. A mix thing. I'm sure there's some doodle in there somewhere.
He's a face licker.
Yeah, So we have the two extremes. And we're good. People are constantly trying to give me more animals, and we're good right now. I have 2 2-legged children, 2 4-legged children, and we're good.
Yeah.
We're a full house.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So otters are your favorite. And then what different types of pets do you see in your practice?
So we're mainly down to dogs and cats. It used to be more, so I would see basically anything with fur. I've never seen birds. There's another veterinarian in town, Dr. Whitted, that does a great job with those. But it's narrowed over the years because when you're only seeing 2 rabbits a year, you're not necessarily really well versed in them, and you don't have staff that can handle them and all those kinds of things. So it's narrowed down to mainly just being dogs and cats. And we usually direct we call them pocket pets, the other, hamsters, gerbils, bunnies, all that kind of stuff to other vets that love to do that kind of stuff. I mean, I'll see one in a pinch, but I don't see them enough to consider myself an expert in them. So mainly it's dogs and cats now, for the most part.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, I mean the world's, it's become so much more specialized, like we were saying before. Like, you just can't do it all. There are some vets out there that do it all, and I applaud them.
There's a different mentality now about your pets than there used to be. Because it used to be that pets were pets.
Yeah, now they're members of the family.
They're parts of the family. And so that's where all these additional expenses and even specialized medicine and all that kind of stuff come in, for sure.
Exactly. It's very, very much changed over the last almost 20 years.
Well, tell me about, so when you started Animal Hospital North, that was 11 years ago or so, then you guys had the little building that you were renting, and then you bought a building that was not a veterinary building. No,
we were in that little building. When I bought the practice, it was in a lease, and so we rented that building for, I think it was about 5 years. And then we needed to grow, but we needed to stay in the same general vicinity there in Viewmont. And so we looked for a building for quite some time, and finally settled on the one we're in now, which actually used to be the surgery center years and years ago, which is now across the street. So it was kind of already set up.
Wasn't it also like an eyeglass?
So it was an eyeglass. It was an optometrist in between those things.
Okay.
But so it was kind of already set up a little bit it had a surgery suite in it, and a couple of things that fit the bill for us. So we ended up in that building where we are now, which is close to Chick-fil-A in Viewmont.
So as a business owner, I know that you have Ben, who's sort of your right-hand man for operational stuff, and I know he probably helped direct a lot of the decisions for that, but ultimately it's your business, which comes with probably a lot of pressure, some amount of risk and that sort of thing. But how did that transition go from now you've got to buy a building and you've got to make sure that your business can support those new costs and all that kind of stuff? Like, do you remember sort of having to navigate all that?
Yeah, it was a big decision to move into that building because it's a big building. And the practice kind of took on a life of its own somewhere in that first 5 or 6 years. And Dr. Ring came on, Lee came on. We had worked together before. And so she came on initially a day a week and then more. And then she helped grow the practice. And so I will say, it just really took on a life of its own. I mean, we didn't do marketing or anything like that. It was just really spread by word of mouth. And so it started to grow on its own. And so, but still moving into that big building was a big financial step that Ben kind of had to talk me into. But by that point, we'd outgrown where we were. We had to go somewhere or to limit the growth. But
and the lease thing kind of did put a clock on it.
Yeah, I mean, so we had to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ended up there.
Do you remember sort of looking at it and going, okay, well, in order to do this, it's going to basically cost us X over the next handful of years. So that means from a production standpoint, we need to do this much business.
Right.
Did you have those kind of metrics in mind?
Ben is the one that does all that, but he basically figures out here's what we're going to be paying for this building. And we are lucky we have a grooming facility in the front that kind of rents some space from us. So that was a way to, offset that. But then it was really just like what you're saying, like, well, we were paying this much in rent and now we're going to be paying this much in, on the building. So we have to figure out how to do that. But I will say that Dr. Ring and I, like, we've never looked at the business really as like we need to make X number of dollars today. Like, neither one of us have, which I guess is good that there's always been a Ben to figure that out, because we don't look at it that way. Like, how we've always looked at it is like, here's an owner and here's a pet and they need this. And what can we do to make that happen? And, and here's plan A, plan B, and plan C, and what can they afford and what can they do and how can we fix this or make it better? And so I think the rest of it just grew organically. Like, it wasn't really about a this number of dollars a day thing. It never was. And maybe that's why it grew the way it did. But I know as a financial person that probably sounds crazy to you, but we never. I mean, if you ask Dr. Ring today how much money the practice made today,
or last
she would
month
have,
or
oh
whatever.
my gosh, she
Y'all
would have
don't know.
no idea.
Right.
No idea.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know.
Right.
I mean, we've never looked at it that way.
Well, but you have someone who is looking at it that way.
But we have, yes, and you're a financial person. So, like, yes, you have to have somebody that's making sure that those decisions are sound. And that was always been.
Well, one of the interesting things about this, and we've talked about this some, through the years, I guess, is your skill set is your skill set. And if it weren't for the owners, you would be even happier dealing with just the pets, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And so, and also, part of the reason I never wanted to become the veterinarian that the pet walked in the door and you were like, how much money can I make off this person? Like, that's,
Sure.
I mean, I never wanted to be that. I mean, that's awful. And so that, I guess, was part of the reason for starting my own practice. I mean, that was never my mentality, or Dr. or Lee's mentality. So the practice, luckily, just grew organically from there.
But you are also the owner of the business. And ultimately, like I mentioned a little while ago, there's some risk, there's some assumed responsibility, and those kinds of things. And so even though that skill set of sort of the operational side of things isn't really your wheelhouse, you do have someone taking care of that. Both you and Dr. Ring have to have other things just in terms of your leadership. So what do you think about when you're trying, and I know Ben handles a lot of HR type stuff as well, but you have to work with your staff, with your technicians, all that you both have to do that. So do you have kind of a plan, or even I guess maybe an orientation, or just sort of what are your expectations when somebody comes in to work with you?
So the hardest part of owning a business for me has been, and I never expected that in a million years. I thought I want to be able to practice veterinary medicine the way I want to. I want to provide a work environment free of drama and conflict. I don't want people to dread coming to work. We love what we do, and can we just have a place to do it that is, drama free and all that. But as the practice has grown, the bigger the staff gets, the bigger those headaches become. Mm-hmm. And that's been probably the hardest, believe it or not, the hardest part of business ownership for me is, and I have a wonderful staff, but it's been hard to find those people and create that environment.
Yeah.
And we've certainly had some not so great periods along the way, trying to get to that point where you're trying to keep everybody happy. And that's hard. I mean, that's hard. I don't want people to dread coming to work in the morning. COVID made that a lot harder. A lot. I mean, I think a lot of industries would tell you that, not to bring up COVID, because everybody's tired of hearing about it.
Actually, I was going to ask you about that, because you had a pretty unique, your business had a pretty unique experience. So what was COVID like for you guys? Because, we're in the middle of so many places are shutting down or you're staying home or you're whatever, and that's not really an option for you.
It was super dicey the first couple months. They did decide that we were considered essential employees, which, I mean, had we had to shut down for 6 or 8 months or a year like a lot of businesses did, like, I don't know how we would have survived that. But we were luckily considered as essential employees. And so we were allowed to remain open. But the first month or two was, it was several employees took unemployment. We're very female doctors, female staff. Some of our staff just had to stay home with their kids. I mean, their kids weren't in school,
are home.
And they're it's the moms that are there working. And so I lost a couple to that. But I will tell you what happened in our industry, which I don't know how many industries this happened in, but which I think is a crazy phenomenon that nobody saw coming. Within a month or two of the COVID shutdown, everybody else was shut down, everybody decided to adopt pets because they were sitting at home. And so I actually have a friend in town whose Disney World trip got canceled that spring. And
so she bought a dog.
She got her daughter the kitten she'd wanted forever. Yeah. I mean, so but it was crazy that how many people went, and I don't know the actual numbers, but like everybody went and adopted. People that had never owned animals before were like, well, this is a good time to get a dog because I'm going to be home.
Well, how about the people that have the animals
and
they're never home, and so now they're sitting at home and they're staring at their dog across the room, and they're like, his tongue sure looks funny.
Yep.
And
we got a lot of that. And so let me tell you, the third thing is they had the time to bring them in because they were home all the time, and they watched and thought maybe they were acting a little weird.
Yeah, this dog sure scratches a lot. Must be allergies.
Yeah, right. Like they weren't home watching them scratch or lick their feet until they were sitting there all day.
Right.
And then the other thing too is I think people weren't spending money on trips and they weren't spending money on going out to eat. And all of a sudden they were like, I need to get my dog's teeth cleaned. And so they would, they started doing more elective things that they wouldn't have necessarily done before. So across, it's not just us, our practice, like across the entire country, visits to the vet skyrocket. I mean, there's a veterinary shortage right now.
Really?
And a lot of it has to do with COVID, yes.
So like Home Depot, Lowe's, and vets all did really well.
I mean, it's hard to find staff. It's hard to find doctors. We haven't really caught back up. I mean, it's starting to level off maybe a little bit, but I think a lot of people didn't understand. And then we had to go curbside. Right. I think I might be one of the only veterinarians in town that didn't have to shut down because COVID took out our entire staff ever during the entire COVID pandemic.
Oh, right.
So, because we work we're there at work during COVID and we're in each other's faces all the time. And so even when we went curbside, if one staff member came in with COVID, it would take out an entire clinic. So we were being, had to be very, very careful not to spread COVID among the staff because it would have just decimated us. And I know there's several clinics in town that did just have to shut down for a week or two.
Yeah. We
went to curbside. We probably did curbside. I can't remember, maybe a year. We tried to get back from curbside as quickly as possible because
Is that true? Because I have a suspicion
yes and no.
that y'all liked that.
Some of that was better, but it took so much more time. You have to go out to the car and get the animal, and then you're trying to do everything on the phone with the owner instead of them just being there. And every time we took this X-ray, and then you've got to call them and go over the X-ray, and then you say, well, now I think we should run some blood work, and then you run the blood work, and then you got to call them, and then it was just incredibly time consuming. Some of it was better because we discovered that a huge portion of the pet animals, dogs in particular, do better when their moms and dads aren't there.
like kids.
Yeah, just like kids. So we did learn a few things. But other than that, it was definitely an interesting time. And I think we're just now catching back up from that. And that's why you heard all this stuff on social media about, we stopped accepting new clients for a long time because we didn't have the time to see our current clients, patients, pets. So like we just didn't have enough time in the day. And so you'd see all these social media posts just like railing on vets and, not being able to get into their veterinarian and waiting 6 hours at the ER. Well,
right.
That's why. I mean, that's why.
People problems turned into pet problems.
Yes. And COVID, everybody got a dog. I mean, everybody, or a cat.
That's wild.
It is. It's crazy.
So when you talk about having veterinarian shortages now, one of the things we talked about before we started recording was that there are more female doctors now than there used to be. And that came up in conversation. We were kind of on the tail end of this past month of acknowledging women, successful women, and women in business and all that sort of stuff. And so there used to be more men vets, and now they're not.
Somebody told me when I was in vet school, which was 19 years ago, that they were in the process of making the transition at the time of being a male-dominated profession to a female-dominated profession. And I think around that time, or in the maybe 5 years after, they started, a lot of the graduating veterinary schools classes now are 85% female, maybe more. I don't know. My numbers might not be exactly right, but that's a significant more, that's a significant difference.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But if you look here in town, when I first came back to Hickory years and years ago, almost every veterinary clinic was owned by a man.
Right. That's what I was just remembering.
Every single one, basically. There's a couple, maybe not. But if you look at them now, as those men are retiring or have retired, they've almost all gone female. Or the other way our world is going is corporate.
Oh,
and that's probably a whole nother discussion. But that's another huge change in our industry.
Is like franchises, so to speak?
Yep, corporations.
Okay.
So several large corporations out there. It probably started pre-COVID, but the craziness during COVID of staff shortages and just how busy the clinics got, I think pushed that into overdrive of corporations coming in and buying private practices. Yeah, it's very different. So when I graduated from vet school, it was, they were all just owned private,
So how does that work then? They basically kind of get to crowdsource some of that overhead and some of the staffing issues and HR and all that sort of stuff. So they just take all that.
As a veterinarian, you can hand it off to them.
Yeah. Which has got to be pretty attractive because, again, sort of skill sets not always matching up with running the business versus doing the practice of veterinary medicine. It
takes that away, and then you can just go back to being, a veterinarian, which is what you wanted to be in the first place. But it's definitely changed the face of our industry for sure. I mean, it's different when it's...
Well, if somebody loves animals, like a young person, do you still have interns anymore?
Yeah, we sure do.
Does it work out well?
It depends how involved they want to be.
Yeah.
Like if they want to get involved, sure, come on in there. I think if you're going to go to vet school, you need to go intern somewhere.
Okay.
Or work somewhere.
Yeah.
I have a couple coming back this summer that are... wanting to get a little more involved, but you definitely need to get in there and see what it's about. It's
so
what
advice would you give somebody who, is crazy about animals? Maybe they pet sit for neighbors and all that kind of stuff. They're like, I would love to do that.
Get in there and see what you're getting yourself into.
Because it's not quite
I think another thing too, to bring it back to finances, is you really need to spend some time looking at the debt you're going to get yourself into. I guess, what would you call that, debt to income ratio? Like, you really need to spend some time thinking about that. Yeah. Because in our world, it's not, I would hazard a guess that it's not the same as it is in human medicine.
Sure.
So, I mean, you have...
Yeah, heart surgeons can pay off their med school bills.
Their faster than we can.
Probably.
Yeah. So it's not something that most people it's not a profession that people go into to get rich.
Right.
And I definitely think, I mean, that especially with things going so corporate, that, the little singles practitioner, small animal GP that has like 2 vets on staff, I think that might be a thing of the past, or will soon be a thing of the past. It's just not. And I think human medicine has gone the same way.
Sure.
They're just ahead of us.
Yeah.
We're just behind the curve. But
Well, so on the subject of kind of the financial implications, one of the things I was going to ask you about was the cost of pet ownership.
oh yeah, that's a hard question to answer.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than what people think.
Right.
I think the first year of a pet's life is much more expensive, just because of the spaying and the neutering and all the puppy shots and all that. And I would say the senior years are a lot more expensive. I mean, you get a couple maybe years there in the middle of their lives where it's a little less expensive, but I mean, it's hard to ballpark costs, and they're different in different parts of the country for sure. But I mean, I think people don't at all realize that, yes, it costs money. It actually costs money to own a pet, like a significant amount of money.
You have like your upfront expenses.
Yeah.
For dogs and cats, you've got training classes, cages, spaying and neutering, whatever, litter box, collars, leashes, all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
Dog
and then the
food
ongoing expenses is all the food, routine vet visits, surgical vet visits, boarding, grooming,
which
toys.
is huge with all the doodles out there now.
Like $1,500, couple $1,000 a year.
I would guess, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think so for sure. And I think the other people don't realize is the cost of, when things happen to these animals, like going to the emergency clinic with it depends what the emergency is, but you're going to be several $1,000s in
right out of the gate
very quickly. And that has changed in, the years I've been doing this for sure. But, for example, a very common injury in a big dog like you guys have is a ligament tear in the knee, which is, we call it a CCL, but it's the same thing as an ACL in a person, which a lot of people have had ACL tears. The surgery to repair that is between $3,000 and $4,000. This is like, nobody prepares for that. Nobody has a money set aside for that.
Well, okay, we'll come back to that. So first of all, our old dog, Harley, who you knew very well
Harley,
also.
Yes.
She was kind of like unstoppable.
Yeah.
We ended up with only one visit to the emergency vet, but she, all the stuff that dogs aren't supposed to have, like, poinsettias are poisonous. She ate those. Chocolate.
Yeah.
She ate like a whole bag of Valentine's chocolates with the foil wrappers.
Yeah.
She was fine. Ended up in the bathtub once when we were cleaning out the drain. So it had Drano, and she's eating and then finally the emergency vet visit was the antifreeze bottle that she pulled out of the garage and ripped the top off and was, and of course she survived through all those things. But we did have to go to the vet in the middle of the night, and it was an excruciating bill.
Yeah, back then.
Especially for when it turned out to be nothing, which you never know, of course. Yeah. But
well, I think people aren't prepared for that at all. I hear every day, emergency clinic charged me this and this. Well, they're providing a service, and it is a lot more expensive than what people realize.
What do you know about pet insurance?
So, a very, 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 very small percentage of our clients have pet insurance. And I don't know why that is. I would say way less than 5% of our clients probably have pet insurance. I think that more people should be considering pet insurance, because I think they don't realize the costs that they could incur in the dog's lifetime or cat's lifetime. Insurance is a roll of the dice, right? So you may never need it, maybe, but there's all different kinds of pet insurance out there.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So I was looking into this a little bit. Most insurance carriers, not most, but a lot of insurance carriers have pet insurance also.
Yeah.
But you really do need to pay attention to kind of the fine print, because for a lot of them, it like won't cover routine visits.
Right. And then some of it's just like emergency.
Right. But
stuff.
then almost all the ones that I saw also have a deductible that maybe is $1,000 or something like that. And so when you have these major things
that are going to cost you $5,000
they'll cover some of it, but then they also have like a lifetime amount that they're willing to cover. So all of a sudden, if you look at surgeries and then maybe cancer treatments and things like that, then you may extinguish that lifetime sort of benefit at some point too. So, but it does seem like, I mean, for not a lot of money, you know, $20 or $30 a month maybe. Yeah. And it does seem, if you get something that has those coverages that for your routine visits, I don't think that's a bad idea.
No, and I mean, if you truly are going to treat your pet like a family member, then it's potentially down the road going to cost you a bunch of money. And so I think that insurance is probably, more people should look into insurance. I personally don't know a ton about it. I'm sure there's good insurance and bad insurance out there. I will say that, you know, it works a little differently than it does in human medicine. Like when you come to the office with the insurance, I can't file your insurance.
That's what I was going to ask. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we accept any pet insurance, but it doesn't, you know what?
It doesn't change your bill necessarily.
No, because you file it with the company. So that's something that's different than human medicine too. So occasionally I'll get that question.
Because there's also like the pricing. I mean, like when we go to the regular doctor, if you don't have insurance, your procedure costs this, or if you do, then it costs 9 times more for some reason.
Yeah, right,
because they've worked out something.
And
with
we
the
don't have
companies.
any of that. Like, you know, when you come to see us, like, if you tell us you have insurance, we'll fill out the forms, and and then give them back to you most of the time, and then you file it. I mean, there's no way for us to do that. Like, it hasn't. I guess in our world, it hasn't evolved into that yet. So I do hear sometimes people saying, well, you know, that clinic or that clinic won't take my pet insurance. And we don't take your pet insurance. Like, it doesn't work that way. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I'm ecstatic if you have pet
but it's
insurance.
On you as
but
the pet
like,
owner.
I just fill out the papers and I can't.
You like submit, you give them the clinical notes or whatever, and it's up to them.
And they do it all. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, we basically say, here's the bill, here's the diagnosis, and then it's between you and the insurance company. So that is a little different, I suppose.
Well, when you look at all the things the lengths that we will go to for our animals these days.
Yeah.
Like this came up in a conversation in our office the other day, and I actually mentioned it to Ben, but right outside of our office is a pet crematorium.
Oh, yeah.
That apparently a lot of crematoriums also offer pet services as well as human services. And now I found out from Ben that they also offer all of the, I don't know, can you say like bells and whistles? All of the different things you can do with whatever your pet's ashes. And
over there.
Yeah, you can actually have funeral services.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I find interesting.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's where we are with our pets now.
It is.
Like, which is not where we were 20 years ago.
Okay, so the idea which came up, Kelly and I were talking about something, and she misheard, and it turned into an idea. And it was, she thought, we had a client call in who had ended up having to take their animal, that sick animal, to the vet, and they were worried about it and all this. But she thought they took it to hospice.
Oh. Okay.
And then I was like, there should be.
There are actually.
Are there?
Vets that do more hospice type. Yeah, we have a great one that comes to town, Dr. Laura.
I don't mean like treatment wise. I was thinking of like the hospice care, like a facility.
Oh,
you have like doggy daycare.
There might be those in bigger cities, but yeah,
and you have a crematorium.
Yeah.
And so if you had like a hospice facility for animals that someone is like sitting around with your little old sick dog and watching soap operas or whatever it is.
It doesn't exist that I know of.
It should.
It probably will.
It will. There's no doubt. I mean,
it may exist in some bigger cities, not in Hickory, but it may. I don't know. But I've not heard of that before, so I don't know. But that's the way we're going.
It's headed that way.
I mean, it really is. I mean, it's become so. I mean, there are vets that they're mobile vets, but they basically just specialize in like hospice care. And so that you don't have to take your old dog that with bad joints and every other thing and stick them in the car and take them to the hospital and get them in and out. And same with the cats. I mean, like they're old, they don't feel good, they don't want to ride in the car. And so they'll come to your house and basically help you navigate keeping those pets comfortable for the last couple years of their life. And then, you know, I mean, but so that...
They used to do things different.
Yeah.
With those situations.
Yeah.
That
It's
now
just
is frowned upon.
Totally changed.
All right. So what are, in terms of the incidents that you run into that you have to address besides like teeth cleanings and all that sort of stuff? So what's some of the most unusual situations you've had with pets?
Well, so we kind of do everything, which I think is what it's very, you know, I keep saying we're like a human GP, but we're not really. So we manage emergencies that come in during the day, or at least stabilize them to get them where they need to be. You know, not everyone can afford going to a specialist. So, you know, sometimes those cases we have to manage the best we can. So sometimes we step in and we're the internist and we're the ophthalmologist and we're the surgeon. I mean, a lot of time, well, we do surgery every day, which is something that a human GP wouldn't do. So we're expected to know and cover all those bases. Most unusual things, I don't, that's tough to think about. I've seen some crazy stuff over the years, medically, but also just like people and pet related. So, I mean.
All right. So what's the weirdest item that a dog swallowed that or most difficult to extract or whatever?
I've taken so many things out of dogs. I definitely took a really expensive engagement ring out of a dog years and years ago. And the owner was definitely way more worried about the engagement ring than the dog. But he just, I guess it was sitting on a side table and he just went over and ate it for no apparent reason. So that was easy to get out. I mean, dogs will eat anything. So, I mean, I've taken, not long ago, I took like, I don't know, 30 or 40 of those hair ties, like ponytail holder, those big black ones.
Big rubber band.
Yeah,
things.
like your daughters have. Yeah, like I took like 30 or 40 of those out of a tiny little poodle's stomach.
Really?
I mean, the entire stomach was just hair bands. I guess he'd been swallowing them for years. So.
And they never got out?
No, they just hung out in there until she finally got sick. Yeah. But I've taken all kinds of things. I've taken a pair of AirPods out of a dog before.
So I saw a video the other day of a vet with like a big German Shepherd that had swallowed one of those Kong toys, which is like the size of this microphone, and it was stuck in his throat.
Oh, yeah.
And so they're like having to manipulate, and then eventually the thing just pops right out.
Yeah.
You have to do all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, I had a dog years ago that swallowed a rubber ball, similar situation, but that's been a long time ago. But yeah, it's whatever walks in, you know, whatever emergency comes flying in, then you at least stabilize it. You know, there's certainly the emergency clinic has some equipment and stuff that we don't have. So like, you know, if they need an oxygen cage or they need to be monitored overnight, I mean, those are things we can't do. So we send those on over, but we at least have to stabilize them while they're there.
Well, a lot of the work that you do, and people may not fully appreciate this, but it's really taxing physically. It's hard. So what are some of the harder things, like physically, just being on your feet, I'm sure.
Being on your feet. I mean, I always tell people, like, it's a very, and I try to tell, you were talking about interns and kids that think they want to go to vet school. Like, it's super physically demanding job. It's also really emotionally demanding. I'm in mentally, of course. But physically, yeah, you're on your feet all day, but you're not only on your feet, you're up and down off the floor. You're wrestling the dog to cut its toenails on the floor, you know, the 120-pound whatever. you're lifting things up on the x-ray table and down and up on the surgery table and down. And, animals don't just sit there so that you can look at them. So
Right.
you're not, you're moving constantly to try to, do your job.
Pretty physically demanding.
Oh, it's really physically demanding. And it's really physically demanding for the technicians too. I mean, more so even. They spend half their day on the floor. I mean, pretty much like trying to wrestle things. And so you get peed on, you get pooped on, you get scratched, you get bit, and that's one aspect of it. Emotionally though, it's a really, when the person walks in with you want to help them, with the sick animal, and sometimes you can't. Sometimes there's not. I mean, how many times a day do we have to go in and tell somebody that their animal has cancer that we can't fix? Or, how many times do we hear an owner comes in and says, well, this was my husband's dog and he passed away 6 months ago and nothing can happen to this dog.
Yeah.
We hear that all the time.
I'm sure.
And it's hard. You if you're emotionally invested in it, which most of us are, you're just, that's hard to do all day, every day. And, and same with the people that, I live on a fixed income, but my dog has this problem, which is probably fixable if you had a couple $100, but they don't. And
yeah.
We do a lot of services for free or discounted, which I think people don't think about. They think, oh, vets are so expensive. But we do a lot. We try to help the rescues out around town.
Yeah, you do.
I have a dog sitting at the clinic right now that was found at Lowe's in Viewmont and doesn't have a home. And we've done everything for it. We've spayed it and did all of its vaccines and heartworm tested it and started on heartworm, just out of the goodness of our hearts. And luckily, Happy Tails Rescue in town, which is an amazing rescue, is taking her tonight and is going to find her a home. But we do stuff like that all the time. So to answer your question, yes, it's very physically demanding. I think a lot more than what people realize. More so, of course, for the technicians. I have to give them the props on that because those of you that know any of the technicians that work at my office, I want to tell you that every single one of those girls can pick up a 50 to 70 pound dog, just deadlift it.
No problem.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah.
And so it's physically demanding, but emotionally it's, mentally you're using your brain, of course, too, but emotionally it can be.
Well, we get so attached.
Yeah. And we're trying to navigate that.
When they're part of our family, I've told people, we in our family now as an adult, we've had to go through this once where our dog had to be put down and all that. And it's it doesn't matter how much sense it makes, whether it's the right decision, the wrong decision, whatever.
Sad.
It's the worst day. It's just an unimaginable
so sad.
thing.
And even when we medically know that that's the right thing to do and the nicer thing to do, we still feel awful for you.
Yeah, I can't imagine. That's got to be tough.
Always say they should teach counseling in vet school. They should teach counseling and they should teach finance because those are two things that maybe they're doing it now, but they don't prepare you for that coming out. Either of those two things.
Well, you are so good at your job and your practice.
I do love my job.
Continues to grow and is such a great service to our community. I know that you have amazing pets you deal with and a lot of good pet owners, probably maybe not all, but I'm sure
the majority. Let's say that
the majority are good. Thank you for sharing some of your story with me.
Sure.
I do have a couple of questions though that I try to ask every guest. So if you can think about what is one of the best pieces of financial advice you've ever been given, or one of the best financial decisions you've ever made.
The clinic, buying the clinic or starting the clinic. That was the right move, I guess financially, but also just for me in my career. I was terrified of the financial repercussions of that. But like I said, that all kind of worked itself out just by me being able to do what I love to do. And so I don't know if I would have made that plunge, definitely not at that point in my life, if Ben hadn't kind of pushed me to do it. And he was right. I mean, it was the right thing to do, for sure. As far as advice goes, though, like you don't get any financial advice in vet school. So you're coming into it. I think now maybe they teach some more financial type classes, but at the time I didn't have any. So I was coming out of vet school with a ton of debt, not a very high income. And so taking on that financial risk was huge, but it's probably the best thing I've done in my career.
Do you remember an incident of one of the worst financial decisions you've ever made? It obviously doesn't have to be like vet related or career.
I mean, honestly, going to vet school without considering the financial ramifications of that. I mean, like, I'm glad I went to vet school.
Kind of like, oh my gosh.
Well, so I went to vet school out of state because I was in a hurry to go to vet school, and Kansas State is a really good vet school, and I got in. And I went, and never one time even considered or thought about like what I might make the first year out of vet school and how I was going to pay that debt back.
How long did it take you to pay the debt off?
A long time.
Too long.
Like, I mean, I think I finally just paid it off a couple years ago. I mean, it's not been that long ago. And vet school now is twice what it was when I went. I mean, it's way more expensive. I mean, you have to think about, like, I think my first job, my first year out, I think my salary was approximately the same as what 1 year of vet school cost me. So paying off 4 years of that, I just wish I'd thought about that more before I went. I mean, it's all worked out in the end. But I think the worst piece of financial advice I got was not getting any financial advice about that.
Right.
Like, no one ever was like, hey, have you thought about this? So, yeah, that would probably be it.
Well, you guys have done such a great job over the years of trying to get your financial situation headed in a particular trajectory. And so that, when you say the best thing you ever did was buy the building, build the practice, that kind of thing, it puts you in a place, and for folks that I work with that are able to start their own business or invest in themselves in that way, it puts you in a place where financially you have control over what those outcomes are.
Right.
And then you get to make some really great decisions about that along the way, depending on how hard you work or how much it's working for you or how successful you may be. Now you have something that you can then kind of pivot and go in a different direction with. And that is a unique freedom that on a balance sheet, it may not always make the most sense. You probably wouldn't have done it if you'd looked at the numbers carefully at that time. But now you look at the numbers and they're really in your favor because of the work that you guys have put into that. So congratulations to that, because that's quite an accomplishment.
Well, and that's one thing about small business I feel like is probably in most small business, like the harder you work, if you're willing to plug it in and work hard, like you can, like you're saying, make it what you want it to be. But like, it took a lot of hours of, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
Especially in the early years to get it rolling and get it to not even where it is today. Now it's taken on a life of its own. But like that was a lot of. I mean, I look back on those years and think, I don't know how I did that.
Right.
I mean, to be honest, when the kids were
if you'd
so
known
young,
then
and,
what you know now, there's no way.
I would never do it again.
Yeah, of course.
Never.
But now you have these great people around you.
Yeah.
You also have some really funny and creative people who work on your signage out front. So if anybody's driving by, they always have some pretty funny signs.
So I will
on the front
say
of their
that they
building.
have to run them by Lee or I to make sure they're not too
A
inappropriate.
couple
We've
that
had
have
a
been a
couple
little
out
edgy.
there that have been a little on the edge.
Yeah.
So.
But you guys are doing great. Thank you again for spending some time with me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So just for those of you who are tuning in or listening to us, again, we'd love for you just to click like, subscribe at the bottom of the YouTube channel, or subscribe on our Spotify channel as well. Appreciate any feedback that you have, any suggestions about other things, topics that we should cover along these lines. And any questions or information that you want to get from Southeast Retirement Planners, you can find that on our website at www.seretirementplanners.com. So, Dr. Duke, thanks for joining me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor. Member of FINRA, SIPC. Southeast Retirement Planners is not affiliated with LPL Financial or registered as a broker-dealer or investment advisor.